places in the world today we can kind of see the power of water. This article on University of Plymouth's website says that exceptionally large floods are not necessary to trigger the creation of gorges within hard rocks such as granite. It showed that and this is at a dam that was built in England, it showed that there was rapid erosion in the 6 years following the dam's construction, with just five flood events, creating a new gorge more than 270 meters. It's almost 300 yards, 3 football fields long, 160 meters wide, and 100 meters deep. One of the professors said, if you showed someone images of the gorge, they would probably say the erosion had taken place over a long period with exceptional flooding. To put it in context, the heads of Niagara Falls and Victoria Falls retreat at about 1.2 to 2 meters and a half a meter per year, respectively. But here we saw more than 270 meters over the space of just 6 years. And there are pictures of some of the flood events that you see. Again, the water just kind of rolling around the granite at that point. Again, starting to cut the gorge there. And you can see again, it's just deepening and widening year after year after these flood events. And there's the dam again as it looks today. And so granite rock, hard, very hard rock, cut in 6 years. We could also think about the Missoula flood, as it's referred to. And Jonathan, you remember staying in Missoula? No? It's a place we stayed at after we left Yellowstone. You remember the Snake River, right? Yep. Went down there on the boat between Idaho and Oregon. Missoula, back here in Montana, again, this was all covered by water at one time. Again, even the secular scientists talk about this. And they say it was probably an ice dam that had backed the water up after the glaciers began to melt. And the flood then came, the ice dam broke, the water came through, and all this area here is called the Scablands in eastern Washington. And again, you see the evidence again from the water. Grand Coulee Dam is up here. And the fellow kind of came up with this idea was Dr. Harlan Bretz. He talks about a glacier cataract 5 times as high as Niagara Falls, 7 times as wide, was the tool that gorged out the finest parts of Grand Coulee, strange 50-mile-long dry canyon in the state of Washington. And it took a long time for secular scientists to accept the idea because, man, this sounds like Noah's flood, right? So they were hesitant, but they finally came around, and even Nova on PBS published a video about the great mega floods of the Ice Age, is what they called it. In the space of just 48 hours, the collapse sent 500 cubic miles of water cascading across the Pacific Northwest. And so here's Missoula. This is actually where we stayed. So the hills around Missoula would have been like the shorelines of the big lake that they were talking about. Here's Grand Coulee Dam. Here's the other side. And again, all this water came through and created this huge gorge in, again, eastern Washington state. You can kind of see evidence of the water again tearing away at the rock. These are called potholes. And again, they're created underwater. The PBS video, this is a screenshot from that. They're created by what's called colts. It's a kind of underwater tornado that occurs in deep flows of fast-moving water for huge potholes in the Scablands. So you think we've got potholes here, they don't quite compare. So here's one. There's a smaller one back there. There's actually a small one over here. And again, it's all through this flat land here that's been washed out by this flood. There's what they call the dry falls. These cliffs are skeletal remnants of what was once the world's largest waterfall. And again, it's kind of dark, but here you kind of see the edge, and the water course would have flown over that. So all this would have been a huge waterfall, larger than Niagara, if you've seen it. You can kind of see the ripple flow marks there at the bottom. So again, you got this huge flood. And again, as it cut through the land, again, it was coming all the way from Montana. As it the area got wider, it began to drop these huge rocks, which had been picked up in the mountains and had been carried by the water. And again, they're just all over the place. They just been dropped by the water as it was, again, as we said, spreading out. And some of them are quite large. You can see next to that fence. So here's again an example. Again, the secular scientists now have accepted the idea that, yeah, all this was caused by a huge flood in Washington State. Another example we have to kind of see the power of water, probably more so what we might call mud flows, is at Mount St. Helens. Mount St. Helens erupted on May 18th, 1980. And as it blew out kind of the side of the mountain, the volcano, it pretty well destroyed the forest all around it, just broke the trees, snapped them. In fact, there was flattened enough trees to build 640,000 houses, to give you an idea of how wide this is. And again, here's the dome that you see. And it did blow out. You know, a lot of times we think about volcanoes spewing up. This blew out the side here. And again, when it did so, it just wiped out the trees. And a couple years later, it created this canyon, which has been called a miniature Grand Canyon. It's 100 feet deep. It was created by a mud flow on March 19th, 1982. Here's a little bit closer picture. Again, you can see it cut through. You can see the sides of the canyon walls. And this is at the Grand Canyon, where Ethan remembers this summer. This is they call it the rim trail. It kind of goes around the rim of the Grand Canyon. And down here on the spots, they've got how many million years ago you are. And so this is Nathan, and that's Denise back there in the red. And Nathan is standing at 290 or 2,960. Well, it's 2,960 million years ago at that spot where he is. Where Denise is standing 10 million years back in time. So again, from that spot to this spot, it's supposed to be 10 million years of sediment that's been laid during that period of time. Now, to kind of give you an idea of perspective of the slope here, you see the 5 steps. So it would be kind of, Denise would be kind of like that bottom of the step, and Nathan's like 5 steps up above that. So in about 5 feet, there's supposedly 10 million years that has taken place. And again, they see all of the layers. They have an idea of when the layers were laid down. Well, one of the things that we see at Mount St. Helens is we see a lot of layers in this miniature Grand Canyon that was created. And even up close, you can see the fine layers of sand there. Ash, really, in this case, it was laid down. And that didn't take millions of years. It didn't take thousands of years. It took one day for that whole canyon to be created by the mud flow. Again, that's just another picture, and it wasn't the little creek running through it that created this. The creek came later, after the canyon was there. This is a little bit higher up. You can kind of get a perspective of it. Then the forest ranger who was there was telling us about Spirit Lake, which is not too far from the volcano. And again, this is a picture of it before it erupted. And you can see Spirit Lake back here kind of in the corner. And kind of zoom in on that. It's still, we were there almost 30 years after the eruption. And there's still trees floating on the lake. And what happened was, again, as the volcano blew out, it basically blew the water out of the lake up on the north shore of the lake and wiped out all the trees, again, as the water came up. And then as the water flowed back down into the lake, it created this large log mat in the lake. And it added 320 feet of deposit on the bottom of the lake, the floor of the lake. And so as you see these trees again, where they've been broken off, as they're floating in the lake, the bottom again becomes waterlogged and begins heavier. They begin to sink, many of them sinking down even upright at the bottom of the lake, sediment again building up around them. And that's actually probably why we have coal today, through that type of process. I got the best look of the Ranger, by the way. So here's the dome as it was before it erupted. Again, you kind of see the side where it was blown out. It was really kind of a cloudy day when we were there, and you probably don't want to go when we did because it's covered with snow. Not the best time. So there's inside the dome. Again, you can't see a whole lot because of the snow. But so here's again the dome. The canyon again comes out, spreads down through. It was created by the mud flow. Here again is the dome, the volcano. There's Spirit Lake, and here's the canyon that we talked about. And so again, you see all that taking place. Again, that 100-foot canyon created not millions of years, not thousands of years, not even weeks, one day. So let's go on down to the Grand Canyon and think about it. Actually, the Grand Canyon is part of what they call the Grand Staircase, which goes up into Utah, Grand Canyon in Arizona. And you see it kind of steps down these different cliff ranges here. And Ethan, I don't know if you remember me showing you the pink cliffs off at a distance as we were driving from Moab. So the ones up top are called the pink cliffs, and you have the gray, the white, and so forth on down. The pink cliffs are where Bryce Canyon is, another national park. And again, it's huge. Kind of help you get a perspective. The little pink circles there are people on horseback riding down into the canyon, so give you an idea of the size of it. There's also other animals besides horses there. So here's the pink cliffs. Bryce is kind of down here in the corner. So again, if you're standing on the north rim looking back, you can kind of see these different layers. I got a picture of layers. Very good. So again, you're at Bryce. That was Bryce Canyon. And then we're going to come on down to the White Cliffs, and that's Zion Canyon National Park. And you can see why they're called white. There's a lot of cross bedding in this area, which is like sand dunes that were created. We'll talk about those a little bit later. Here, again, it was hazy when we were there, so it's hard to see the 3-4 layers. But there's the White Cliffs. You can kind of barely see them. Pink Cliffs would be up here at the top of that staircase. And so when we get to the Grand Canyon itself, we've already dropped quite a bit. And all of these layers that you see are sediment that have been laid down. At the bottom, this is again hard rock, granite rock. There is one exception. You see this black here, that's lava flow, which would be what kind of rock? Remember your 3 kinds of rocks? Okay, look it up. So again, you see here the different layers of the Grand Canyon. There's the red wall limestone. This is the Coconut sandstone. Some people call it the bathtub ring around the Grand Canyon. It's kind of whitish rock. You kind of see it in the background there. That one. And at the bottom, there's the Colorado River. And so you got the river down at the bottom. And this first layer, called Topeka sandstone, this line right here, you see, again, all the way through the Grand Canyon, is called the Great Unconformity. And basically that is, it's like you almost sliced a cake and laid another layer on top of it. There's no signs of erosion, no indication of, wind-blown areas or things like that being created. It's just laid down almost flat on top of this area. And then above that, you got, again, as we said, the Topeka sandstone, which would be this area, again, right above that Great Conformity line. Bright Angel Shale, Mauve limestone, Red Wall limestone, Supe Group, Hermit Shale, the Coconut sandstone, Tara Wood Formation, and then top the Avab Formation. You've got fossils all the way through here. Most of these in the lower part are marine fossils. In the redstone limestone, you have what's called nautiloids. And this is a fossil of a nautiloid. We'll pass that down the road so y'all can see that. That's a smaller one than this one, obviously. But they were like a squid-like animal that lived in a cone-shaped shell. And there's tens of millions of these that have been estimated throughout the Grand Canyon. It actually goes beyond the Grand Canyon, right outside of Las Vegas, for another 180 miles. They're so thick that they average about 1 fossil per 4 square meters in Grand Canyon. So again, that's one type of fossil that you see in the redstone, red wall limestone. This is the Coconut sandstone, and it's at that layer. So here's red wall, and here's the Coconut. It's at that layer that we begin to see not marine creatures. Oh, well, there's still marine creatures all the way through, but you start to see 4-legged creatures. And here's again a sample of their tracks. in that sandstone. The at the top, this is the north rim, and down at the bottom of that white rock, you can kind of see all kinds of fossils there. Again, kind of zoom in, you kind of see the size. And you see these shells. When you go to the beach, you usually find the shell closed like that. You usually find a half, right? So when they are closed, the muscles are still working. They shut, and so they're still alive. So to find them like that shows you that they were buried alive. They just didn't die. When we die, the shell flops open because the muscle relaxes. So you find a lot of those again throughout the Grand Canyon, but also in even the top layer. Going back to that Pocono sandstone, again, as we said, there's cross beds here, just like there was at Zion. And you kind of see the marks. And remember, Ethan and I walked down the trail, Bright Angel Trail, and we kind of got down to that level to see that. There's two ways that can be created. Sand dunes are created by wind. If you've been to Nags Head, you've seen the sand dunes there where Wright brothers had their first flight. And they also are created underwater, water flow. And so scientists, they'll, like those footprints, they would say, well, those were made out in the desert, in the sand. But there is a difference between dunes formed by sand and dunes formed by water, and that's the degree of the tilt. By wind, they're usually 30 degrees and higher in the tilt of the dune. You put a protractor on these, and they are 25 degrees and under. So that's the kind that's formed underwater. So again, all this would have been formed by water. Another thing we can see as an indication of being formed by water. Go back to Moab, Utah from that. That's north of the Grand Canyon. It's where Arches National Park. Both of y'all been there. Again, the scientists recognized that this was a floodplain that you see here, and you can see. It's going to be hard for you to see because it's dark, but there's layers here, and you can see them being folded. Can you see that, John? Okay. It's hard, it's kind of dark. So you think about layers. If we had clay, and I found out when I went to buy clay, they make clay that doesn't dry out anymore. So that doesn't help me any. So let's say we got several layers here, and when we look at later, when the flood was draining, and again the tectonic plates as they're moving, continents bumping into each other and pushing the land's folding. And so if I have layers that are dried out and I try to fold them, what's going to happen? You heard it crack. I'll make a mess. I'm going to quit. It's going to break. But at least got these out of the can this morning. And so they're nice and soft. And when you push on those, they're going to fold, right? And so you see this type of fold, and that's at Moab. This one's at the Grand Canyon. You can see the fold. In this case, it goes almost 90 degrees straight up. Now, you don't get that except under two conditions. Obviously, if it's wet, still damp, like Play-Doh was, you can fold it. Another way is heat. So you can see sometimes in volcanoes folds in the rock because they were still pliable. But that goes back to different types of rock. In volcanic rock with heat, that's one type. But what did we say the Grand Canyon was? It's sediment. So that gets us back again to water. It had to be damp in order to get that kind of fold. So just like with Missoula flood, there was probably, again, backed up water that created the Grand Canyon. And as these sediments had been laid down by the flood, again, maybe in the draining of the flood, they could have been created. But the water amount would have been 3 times that of Lake Michigan. And so Denise and I did a little experiment out on the porch yesterday. And so we've got us a little canyon. We're going to put a lake behind it. And you can see pretty soon it becomes so soaked that it begins to kind of break. You see it getting damp. And comes the water. And it follows, some tracks that are already there, but it does get to the point where it kind of, so much water, and I got carried away there, it just, it creates its own path. So we watch it in slow motion here. You start seeing a little darker because the water again soaking through. Pretty soon it will start coming out. It starts flowing. Again, it's obviously going to take the low ground as it begins, then because there's so much water, will eventually start creating a bigger track. I think about right here is where it starts. You see the sand breaking away. So that, again, kind of give you an idea of maybe how it happened. But we go to the textbooks. High school, it's Dr. Miller's textbook. He says these rock layers in Grand Canyon were laid down over millions of years and were then slowly washed away by the river, forming a channel. I argued that the Earth was much, much older than a few thousand years. Otherwise, how would a river have enough time to create a valley? And in the teacher's edition, in the side note, it says, moving waters gradually eroded rock layers. Discuss how long it took the Grand Canyon to form. Geologists estimate the Grand Canyon formed over 6 million years ago. So let's think about that a minute. The Grand Canyon, of course, the Colorado River, they say, formed the Grand Canyon. Starts up in the Rockies. Not too far from, there's a picture kind of near the source. Not far from Granby, Colorado, 8,284 feet above sea level. Comes on down to Glenwood Springs, 5761, Grand Junction, 4593. Gets down to Moab. There's a picture of the Colorado River at Moab. The elevation there is 4,025 feet. At Page, now crossing over to Arizona, where Glen Canyon Dam is. There's a picture of the dam. and you're at 3,700 feet. There's another dam on Colorado, which is the Hoover Dam, that's past the Grand Canyon, right outside of Las Vegas. And that's at 2,030 feet, and then from there it kind of just drops, gets to Yuma, 112 feet. There's a picture of it at Yuma before it leaves the United States, goes into Mexico. So water flow uphill or down? Down, right? So that looks pretty good, right? 8,005, 45, 4. So we're going down, but the Grand Canyon is, again, a part of a plateau, and the elevation of that plateau is 9,200 feet. So let's think about that. We're going down in elevation, Colorado River, and all of a sudden there's a 92, well, subtract 3,700 from it, say a 6,000 foot wall. Where's the water going to go? Straight through it, right? Uphill, and going to carve out this big gap, right? I don't think so. Water doesn't run uphill, and certainly doesn't create that big a canyon again in this area, and so that's kind of a problem. During the back in the 60s, scientists, geologists began talking about mega sequences. And the mega sequence is sea level rising, falling into a craton, depositing layers of sediment. And a craton basically refers to the interior of a tectonic plate, or in this case, the North American continent. And so this huge sea level rising, coming in, and deposits all that you see. That's the Tepete sandstone that's at the bottom of the Grand Canyon. And then you have another sequence coming along. There's 6 of them that again the secular scientists record as occurring over North America. 4 of them you can see in the Grand Canyon. You've probably seen this in, again, textbooks, the geological column, as it's sometimes referred to in the textbooks. And this is where they place these 6 sequences, again, on this particular scale. That's the geologist. The biologist and the paleontologist talk about that there's been 5 mass extinction periods, where they're not going to say there's only one time when most of the animals were wiped out. They've got 5, and again, there's when they occurred and the names they give to them. The first one is the second largest. Animals were killed. Wikipedia says this event greatly affected marine communities and wiped out nearly 85% of the marine species. The second one wiped out about 70%. Again, it also affected marine species like the trilobites that you see down there at the bottom. The third one is the most severe, and they wiped out about 96% of all species, they say. And you begin to see other animals now other than marine creatures in that one. Jurassic boundary, and it included, again, larger animals that you're now seeing. And then the last one is the one probably most kids know about. That's when supposedly the dinosaurs died out by an asteroid, wiping them out. So we've got these 5 periods when animals, again, great killing of animals throughout the world. And when you put them next to these geological sequences, you can kind of see when they occur and kind of a relationship between the two. We talked about when we studied Genesis, in Genesis chapter 1, the idea of being one, the land and the ocean being one, instead of a lot of continents like we have today. And so if you talk about before the flood, you got Pangaea, one continent, and then like the earth is today, that would be higher up on the chart, by the way. During the flood, you'd have these breakup, again, of the continents, the tectonic plates that scientists talk about occurring at this time. And not continental drift, slow movement like it is today, but rather rapid movement as, again, they're bumping into each other. So these are the tectonic plates. This is the area where you see, again, all the earthquakes and volcanoes taking place. And so you think about that one continent splitting up, dividing, and the Bible talks about the great deep burst open. And so this is an animation that some consider how that may have happened, again, bringing about the flood. If in the creation there was huge water levels under the crust, and as the continent split and started to move on these plates, a huge amount of water, there may have been volcanic activity with it as well that would cause, again, a great deal of steam, which would send it into the atmosphere, and thus falling back down as the 40 days and 40 nights of rain. Continents, again, spreading farther apart, and then at some point coming back together again, bumping, creating the mountains. Think about the crash dummy test you've seen on TV. You know, they show a car hitting a wall at maybe 20 miles an hour, and there's a little bit of bending, and run into it 50 miles an hour. There's a whole lot of bending. And so as these continents, again, would be hitting each other, the mountains would be rising, which, again, would help the drainage of the water. You see the Rockies here. They would pop up. And in Psalm 104, he talks about the mountains rose up, valleys went down in the place where you pointed them. You set a boundary that they may not pass over, that they may not again cover the earth. And so that may be what, again, is being discussed here as you have these plates moving. Now, again, the evolutionists has this geological column, and they talk about, you know, these are great long periods of time, and you've got animals, different living at different times and so forth. But instead of different times, let's think about different places and different environments that animals live in. For example, going back to the Grand Canyon, this is at the bottom, this is at the entrance to the Grand Canyon, down from the Glen Canyon Dam. And again, you look, of course, there's green around the river, but it's basically desert. Whereas you go on top of, this is looking at the north rim, you see the ponderosa pine, and you can see different, not only different kind of plants, but different kind of animals. This is at the north rim. Here you're at the bottom. Different kinds of creatures you see there. And so again, instead of this being different time periods, think of it from the standpoint of being different locations. As the flood waters are rising, as they cover part of lowland area, and again, another big mega sequence comes in and covers another area. It's got different plants, different kind of animals. And Ethan and Nathan, we took them in was it July, June? July. We rode the train up from Williams to Grand Canyon, and it's about a 2,000-foot difference in elevation. And you see I took these pictures through the train window. So here you see it kind of a desert-type climate. You know, certain kinds of animals, certain kind of plants are going to be there. You go a little bit later, you begin to see, you know, small trees, larger shrubs, and finally you get up to the rim, and you've got the Ponderosa pine, and totally different kind of animals. We saw elk in the woods there. So again, you've got two views. The evolutionist looks at the fossil column, and they say this took a great deal of time, and animals lived at different times, and they didn't see each other. They didn't have any kind of relationship with each other. The creationist looks at it and says this is different environments, nearly within the same time period, the year of the flood. That's been again laid down by the great sequences that have overflowed the continents again during the flood. And I was going to talk about my water jug here. The Bible talks about, remember Noah, he let out, what was the first bird he let out? Remember? Raven, right. Did the raven come back? No, dove came back. The Bible talks about the raven went to and fro on the earth to find a resting spot. That same word that's used there is used later of the flood water itself. And this is after the rain stopped, after the great deep had been closed. But again, the water, see if I can do this without spilling a bunch of it, is still going back and forth, still being agitated. I'm going to clean the building. But anyway, you can see that as it settles, you're going to have what's going to drop first, heavier or light material? Heavy, yeah. So you can see and I didn't shake it up good enough, but even before I did that, you could see the sand at the bottom, and then just kind of a layer of dirt here, and then the water that's still, so you can kind of see the different layers. And so all that was occurring, again, still with the water, rain stopped, there's still movements again of the plates, and would cause still a lot of agitation. Even after Noah left the flood, there still may have been plate movement. We don't know when that stopped. Well, it's still going on today, it's just not as fast. And again, there could have been large gaps of water, places of water, like the Missoula Lake, like maybe a big lake behind before the Grand Canyon, that again could have drained after the flood actually stopped, after Noah had left the ark. So still a lot of things, we don't know, we can kind of speculate about, but there is, I think, a big difference in what the evolutionist says about what we see, and again, what the creationist says about what we see. Anything before we quit? Sorry, I didn't give you more time to ask a question. All right, so that's how we kind of think the fossil record came to be. Now, next week, we'll talk about evidence for evolution. So let's see some of those fossils that the evolutionist says, and look at some other fossils and see again which interpretation fits best as we actually observe what we can see. So appreciate your attention this morning.